Okay, so the question for this week's homework is discuss the extent to which membership of the EU single market and Eurozone is beneficial for countries which are already part of the EU free trade zone. So it's about EU integration, but what it does say is that they are already part of the free trade zone. So really, you're not going to talk about any benefits of free trade. What you can either do is look at the single market and the costs and benefits of that, or the Eurozone and the costs and benefits of that. As it's a discuss question, then it's two sides plus a judgment. So just 2 points well explained. The topic itself is economic integration. So this is a macro topic. Useful bits of information from the case study that are relevant for the question. It says the countries can join the EU if they meet the quote criteria, membership criteria known as the Copenhagen criteria. These include a free market economy, stable democracy and the rule of law, and the acceptance of all EU legislation. So if you want to be part of the single market and the economic and monetary union, you need to do these things. The EU legislation is in effect harmonised regulation, so you would have to have the same regulation as the other EU countries. Other parts of the case study, it describes what the single market is, freedom of movement of people and capital across the EU. That would be a good bit of knowledge and application to add, or if you choose the Eurozone, centralised monetary policy, ECB as being the central bank, and adoption of a single currency. So again, key bit of knowledge and application there. If you're going to go for the question on the single monetary policy, economic and monetary union, this paragraph as well gives a little bit more information on that. So a common currency of the euro, the European Central Bank makes monetary policy changes for all countries, and its main goal is price stability across the EU, so on average, not in an individual country. It does mention a little bit about loss of control of fiscal policy. Even though you can choose your taxes, you have to do so within constraints, and those constraints are mentioned at the bottom, and that might be, again, a nice wider way to look at the judgment on this. So if we go for the single market initially in terms of costs and benefits, so if there is a freedom of movement of capital and people, one thing is that potentially there will be more immigration. Because of that, you will have an increase in aggregate supply within your economy. That would bring down the price level due to lower wages. The lower wages would allow businesses' cost of production to decrease. This would increase investment, and this could lead to economic growth within the economy, and we'll just add a Y and Y1 to that. In terms of the negatives of immigration, on an individual level, if the wages are falling and ceteris paribus, the price level or the price of goods and services doesn't fall, so stays the same, then workers' standards of living will fall. So there might be downward pressure for some people due to the immigration on their standards of living. The other way you could approach it is to look at increased supply of capital to the UK through more finance in banks. That would reduce the cost of loans and increase business investment as well. In terms of the economic and monetary union, if there is a common currency of the euro, then you have no transaction costs from changing between currency. You also don't have businesses hedging or buying commodities or goods in futures markets, and both of those things will mean that business costs of production are lower. And again, the benefit therefore is that there is a increase in investment and a boost to economic growth within an economy. You could also look at linking that to wider stability, because the ECB may be more able to create stability, and that being a secondary reason that businesses want to invest, because they know that the exchange rate, even between say the euro and the dollar, is more stable, and inflation would be more stable across this bigger zone. The loss of control of monetary policy you can also call sovereignty. So you lose the ability to control your own monetary policy. So if, for example, Turkey's inflation is high and the whole of the EU's or the rest of the EU's is low, when Turkey potentially would join, what you would end up with is that the interest rates are for the majority, not the minority. So in this case, the interest rates would be lowered to try to boost economic growth and inflation within the majority of countries. However, that would be a negative for Turkey, because Turkey needs higher interest rates to reduce inflation. So you lose the ability to do something that's specific to your economy. Another example would be that you couldn't devalue your currency through quantitative easing, or even use quantitative easing to boost your economy if things aren't going very well. Both of those, there's two ways you could evaluate this. Well, there's more than two ways, but this is two straightforward ways. One of them is what we call harmonisation, and it depends upon the harmonisation or the structural harmonisation of the countries within the zone. What that means is that in terms of your aggregate supply, in terms of quantity and quality of your factors of production, you've got a similar workforce, they're educated, they're highly skilled. In terms of the structure of your economy between primary and secondary, they are roughly similar as well. And in that situation, if you are harmonised, you should be similar, and if you are similar, then the monetary policy will affect you the same. So in theory, if you are harmonised, it's less likely that one country would have high inflation where other countries didn't. But harmonisation comes from aggregate supply. So you have to look at kind of a structure in which, and for example, the EU uses money paid into the EU, the UK pays in more, we're a net contributor, Poland is a net receiver, to try and get them structurally adjusted and harmonised to the rest of the EU. So when they do join the euro, they are more similar and it affects them the same. Another big one is it depends upon the extent to which, or the size of, your trade within the bloc. So for example, if the UK has 50% of its trade with the EU, then that might be quite significant and you would gain a lot of benefits. If currently only 5% of your trade was with the EU, then benefits of having a single currency may not be to the same extent. So you could look at how you solve the problems, or you could look at the extent to which the benefits are there for that country.